She slowly pressed down on the brakes of the car while keeping a close eye on the trash bag, which was slowly but surely moving closer to the road. She felt confused as her car almost stopped. As she pulled up next to it, she looked out the window to see what was going on, only to find out the truth. Lacey only wanted to get away from the problems at work when she chose to go home that afternoon. The stress of her life had worn her down, and she needed a break right away. She worked all week even though she was sick, and she couldn't wait to get home. What seemed like a normal drive, though, turned out to be one of the most life-changing events she had ever been through. Lizzie Happy was a normal 35-year-old mom living in Denver, Colorado. She was a single parent trying to make a good life for her two girls, Nancy and Tina. Because Lizzie worked as a librarian and her kids were still young, their lives were pretty quiet. On that particular afternoon, though, they were in the public eye. Lizzie had been a librarian for more than 10 years. And her job was generally just as lax as her personal life. She liked her job and was thankful for the chance to work somewhere she liked. During that terrible week, Lizzie broke her daily pattern even though she had a bad cold. The week was going well until she got a bad cold that made her nose stuffy. Her throat hurt, and her joints and head hurt. Lizzie didn't ignore her duties as a mom and worker, even though she didn't feel like her best self. For school, she got her kids ready and had her sister drive them. Then she went to work. Things began to fall apart, though. It got tired, and I had a cough that wouldn't go away and muscle pains. When Lizzie's boss saw that she was sick, he told her to take the rest of the day off. It was afternoon, and Lizzie was thinking about what her boss had told her. She had no idea what was waiting for her on the way home. She got in her car and started the long drive home. She was excited to get to bed and rest. Even though she was tired, she took a different path to try to escape traffic. As planned, the road ahead was clear, so Lizzie could drive slowly. As soon as Lizzie got to the open road, though, she saw something that confused her and made her think. A black trash bag far ahead on the side of the road caught her eye right away. She leaned forward to get a better look and thought it was strange that someone would throw trash on the empty roads. At first, Lizzie thought it was just a trash bag. But as she got closer, she saw something strange about it. The bag was moving quickly and was stumbling all over the road. Lizzie gently pressed on her car's brake because she was scared. She wasn't sure if her illness was making her see things or if the bag was really moving. To give herself a reality check, she almost stopped her car and stuck her head out the window to find out more. It looked like there was a creature stuck inside the bag because it was moving and sounding strangely while Lizzie wasn't sure what to do. She automatically grabbed her phone and began recording what was happening, even though she wanted to look into it because she was interested. She stayed in her seat out of fear. Lizzie thought for a moment before deciding she could no longer stay in the car. She cautiously opened her door while the phone was still recording and walked up to the moving trash bag. The black plastic bag outside the car let out growls and snarls. Lizzie saw that the growls were changing into whining and crying, which scared her at first. Now that she couldn't get away, Lizzie took a deep breath and moved toward the bag. She poked it gently with her phone and heard whining, which meant the animal inside was in trouble. Even though Lizzie felt more and more scared, she stopped being careful. Without any hesitation, she quickly took the bag off the shelf. When she saw what was inside, she was so shocked that her mouth was hanging open wide. When the trash bag started to move, Lizzie thought the worst was going to happen. She saw a huge snake. Still, she couldn't stand to leave the animal stuck inside the bag without help. It wasn't always easy for her to do the right thing, but she had help. Lizzie quickly opened the bag as she walked up to it. And what she saw inside made her move closer, a puppy. Her lips turned into a smile as she whispered and pulled the little guy toward her. The puppy licked her hands and wagged its tail as it ran to her. Lizzie helped it into the car while her phone kept recording. And then she drove off. She quickly put a note about the dog on her social media when she got home. As an animal lover, she couldn't imagine why someone would do something like that. Lizzie knew the puppy belonged to someone when she saw a tag on it. She did think about how the dog got into the trash bag on the side of the road. Though, was it stolen or did the owners intend to throw it away? The thought of being so mean made her heart hurt. She posted a picture of the puppy on Facebook in the hopes that the owner would come forward. Lizzie wrote on Facebook, "Let me know if this is your puppy. If you are the scoundrel who put it in a garbage bag and tossed it on the side of the road. You are sicko." After Lizzie shared the picture on social media, she took the poor dog to the vet to get checked out. He was only 3 months old. The vet said, and gave him a good bill of health. Lizzie's story went popular on social media, getting a lot of attention. She quickly found herself talking to the media about how she found the puppy. "She told me about the moment. The bag was tied off in a knot. So I carefully tore off a corner and peered inside. It was a puppy. And he was so happy to see me. He saw light as soon as I opened it and started wiggling his tail. He was sure he was okay. I had no idea." Even though her story went global, no one came forward to claim the puppy. Lizzie wasn't too shocked because of what had happened. That it made her worst fears come true. She had a terrible feeling that the puppy's owner had cruelly left it on the side of the road. She had a hard time understanding why someone would do something so cruel. The American Humane Society says that about 6.3 million pets are turned into animal shelters every year, with about 3.1 million dogs and 3.2 million cats. The person who threw away the little puppy didn't even do the right thing by taking him to a shelter where he could have a better life. Adopting and leaving behind pets is a big problem not just in the US but around the world. Spaying and neutering your pets is important to help dogs and cats by stopping them from having litters and giving money to local animal charities. Every year, millions of dogs and cats are put down. And general spaying and neutering can help solve the problem of too many animals. People are told to adopt a dog or cat from a rescue instead of buying them from a breeder. After a month, no one claimed the puppy. And Lizzie and her girls were already happy to have him as part of their family. People loved Lizzie's bravery and kindness. And she became famous on the internet for having a heart of gold. Even though it was stressful at first, the experience turned out well for her family. And the puppy, named Pete, found his place. It wasn't the last time she helped an animal in need. Though, about a year after she saved Pete, Lizzie saw something strange curled up on one of the shelves in the historical notification area of the library where she worked. She had seen a lot of strange things at the library, but this was the first time she had seen anything like it. She had seen a dead rat in the library before, but this was a completely different case. She had, however, never seen a thing like this up close before. Lizzie called the library director in a quiet voice to make sure the little animal was who it said it was. He found a cute little brown bat curled up next to a book on the shelf, sound asleep. This shocked him. Lizzie called the animal shelter and waited calmly for help, being careful not to wake the sleeping bat. 20 minutes later, Officer Roy Bass showed up and stayed calm and relaxed. It was even okay to take a quick picture of the bat with the book called Bats at the Library. When asked about it, Lizzie said that Officer Bass carefully put the bat in a box and quickly shut the lid. The little brown bat lives in colonies that can have hundreds of thousands of people. They are common in the northern US and most of Canada. Different roosts in these groups are used for different things. During the day, some are used for resting or napping. And at night, Others are used for shelter. There is still no clear story about how the bat got into the library to take a nap. Bats have a bad image around the world. But you can often see them in libraries in Portugal, where they are welcomed because they keep bugs and moths out of books. Bats don't usually have rabies, even though they are thought to spread disease and feed on blood. People don't like bats because they can carry well-known diseases like Ebola, Marburg, and Nipah. On the other hand, bats are very important to the ecosystem and help it in many ways, because Lizzie loved animals. She was determined to help any animal that was in trouble. The little brown bat that was found in the library was sent back into the wild by animal control. This time to a wildlife reserve close by. This wasn't the only strange thing that happened to the library staff. Because the library is close to a wildlife reserve, they found mice in the story time room and stray cats in the stacks. The library staff always tried to help when it was safe to do so, whether it was a pet or a wild animal that was in trouble. If they couldn't help personally, they called animal control or the right authority right away. Lizzie is sure that all animals are very important to the earth and are a part of its complex environment. She suggests that people who want to help more should ask for help at local animal shelters or wildlife conservation centers. That's all about the first story, and now let's watch another similar story. With his axe in hand, the man found a strange tree that amazed him. Its effects could be seen on the cobblestone streets of a cute town, where houses huddled together like old friends. Don Mateo lived in this town. He was older than most of the trees in Central Park. From his window, he could see how the world had changed. His stone and wood home was a silent memorial to his life, with family pictures on the walls, dusty books on the shelves, and memories of a simpler time. It was a nervous rumble in the main hall as Don Mateo's grown children talked to each other. It sounded like wind stirring leaves. One said, "It's decision time. We can't keep going like this," said someone else. The old man listened while sitting in his carved wooden chair. Even though his eyes were cloudy from age, they still sparkled with the cunning that made him famous when he was young. But now, his body wasn't responding the way it used to, and his clear mind wandered to old memories. "Father, you've been the rock of the family for years," his oldest daughter said. She had a grave look on her face and strong hands from working hard. "But now things are different. We can't give you the care you need." Even though she spoke with worry, there was a hint of impatience in her words. Don Mateo slowly nodded, but his eyes were drawn to something outside the walls. "We think it's best for you to move to the cabin in the woods," his middle-aged son, who always had a frown on his face, said. "Away from the noise and chaos of the city. There you'll find peace. You can remember the good old days." Don Mateo knew the cabin well. It had been a safe place for him to be happy and alone when he was young. The thought of going back there by himself made him feel unbearably sad. "Is this your wish?" he asked in a shaking voice, thinking about how he could spend the last few years of his life by himself. The debate went on for hours, but a choice was made in the end. Don Mateo knew deep down that his kids thought taking care of them was too much work. With every word and fight, the idea of spending his last days with family and friends loving him lessened. As the town slept under a layer of stars in the early morning darkness, hope began to fade. A car moved slowly along the road that led to the woods. Don Mateo looked out the window from the back seat. The city lights slowly went out, looking like shooting stars going out into the night. Julian, the maid's son, watched what was going on from the shadows. He was only 15. But that didn't make it any less clear to him that something was wrong. With more drive than his years, he made up his mind to do something. He hid himself in the trunk of the car while the family fought. He was a quiet witness to what he saw as an unforgivable act of cruelty. the trip took almost 2 hours. Which seemed like forever to Don Mateo. When they got there, his kids helped him get out of the car quickly and without any love. "We hope to never see you again. Old useless man," they said coldly as they shut the car door. Leaving a cloud of dust and a void of sound, the old man was left alone and confused. And he started crying. Each tear told a story of loss and being without love on his worn-out face. At that very sad moment, a young voice broke the quiet. "You are not alone, Don Mateo," Julian said as he came out from hiding. "I am here with you. And I promise to help you." Don Mateo looked up in shock. "I asked Julian. Why are you here? You need to go back. You have a life ahead of you," he said in a worried voice. "Staying here alone will only bring you trouble." But Julian shook his head, showing that he was older than his years. "Don Mateo, I can't leave you alone. I feel like I need to stay. I'm sure that God has a plan for us." He wasn't going to give up. And his eyes were filled with courage and kindness. That night, Julian wrote a letter to his mom, Donna Dorotea, under the roof of the simple house. He talked about his choice to stay with Don Mateo in simple but emotional language. He was sure that his mother would understand because she saw in him the same spirit of sacrifice and kindness that she had taught him as a child. When Donna Dorotea got the letter a few days later, she felt stressed out and she felt proud because the child she had raised with so much love had heart and strength that many people lacked. She felt bad about being away from him. But she knew Julian was doing the right thing. In the peace and quiet of her own home, she said a silent prayer for her son's safety and the health of the old man she now thought of as family. Don Mateo and Julian started getting used to their new life in the cabin at the same time. Every day had its own problems and obstacles. But it also had times of happiness and learning. They learned how to live off the land and cut down trees to keep the fire going. They also picked fruit from the trees. Even when he was scared or had doubts, Julian never changed his mind. He thought about what his mother had said and what his faith taught him. He knew that everything was connected to a bigger plan. Every morning brought new hopes. And every night ended a new part in the strange story of an old man and a young man who lived in a cabin. Because of strange events that brought them together, their relationship grew, creating a bond that went beyond blood, one of respect, love, and understanding. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. As the seasons changed, so did the plants and animals around the house. Don Mateo and Julian's lives changed to fit the rhythms of the forest. They found peace in the trees and under the stars that is hard to find in today's world. In that little cabin in the middle of the forest, a story of love and forgiveness began. It was a story that was far from over. With each new day, a world of options opened up. The cabin had its own pace that was different from the rest of the world. Don Mateo saw a shred of hope in every small thing he did every day when Julian was around. Every morning, before dawn, Julian got up to make breakfast as the sun slowly poked through the trees. The early morning was quiet, but the sound of wood squeaking as he stoked the fire broke the silence. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the smell of the forest. Julian smiled and said, "Good morning, Don Mateo," as he put a hot cup next to the old man. "It's a new day full of possibilities, Don Mateo." The old man was glad to see the young man and said, "Thank you, Julian Cito," though his voice was still hoarse from sleep. "I'd be lost without you." Even though his words were simple, they were full of deep earnestness. Also in town, Don Mateo's leaving had left a hole in the lives of his family. In the beginning, they thought that his disappearance was a relief, but they quickly started to miss him. At meals in the big family house, there was silence. Conversations that used to be full of plans and laughs turned into forced exchanges of words. Donna Dorothea, Julian's mother and the house servant, had a heavy heart. She agreed with what her son did, but she was still worried about him. She sent a prayer every night before she went to sleep for Julian and Don Mateo's safety and hoped that life in the cabin wouldn't be too hard for them. As she cleaned the living room one day, she heard Don Mateo's kids talking about selling some of the old man's property. They said, "It's better to take advantage now that he's away," and their greed was barely hidden. Hearing from behind the door, Donna Dorothea felt both angry and sad. How could they be so careless? They didn't know how important family, love, and respect for a dad were. Back at the house, Don Mateo spent the afternoons teaching Julian about plants that grow in the forest, how to fish in the nearby river, and stories from his own childhood. He said, "This forest was my safe place when I was young. Every tree, every stone has a story to tell." There was a lot of value in what the old man said. So Julian paid close attention. "Did you ever feel lonely here?" Julian was interested and asked. Don Mateo responded with a thoughtful look. "Loneliness is a strange friend. There are times when a friend gives you time to think and times when an enemy takes over your life. But now that you're here, I'm no longer alone." At night, in the cabin, people would tell stories and talk about their hopes while the fire danced and cast shadows on the walls. He talked about his late wife and said that her love had been the love of his life. Julian then told them about his goals and dreams. He said he wanted a better future for himself and everyone he cared about. When the fire was almost out one night, Julian admitted, "Sometimes I think of my mother and how much I miss her. On the other hand, I feel like I'm on the right track. I should be here with you." As he put his hand on Julian's shoulder, Don Mateo said, "Your mother must be very proud of you." His eyes showed a mix of thanks and sadness. "Tomas, you have a kind heart. That is the most valuable thing in the world." In the town, Don Mateo's kids were starting to understand how bad their choice was. Their guilt started to get the best of them, and they went to the cabin less often to check on the old man. Every day that Don Mateo wasn't in the family home, it felt like a sound from the past that they might have forgotten too fast. Don Mateo and Julian kept building their life together in the house, one day at a time. Every sunrise seemed like the start of something new, and every sunset felt like the end of a day well spent. In that small cabin in the middle of the forest, an odd but deep friendship grew. It went against everyone's assumptions and showed that family can be found in the strangest places and with strangers. As the sun slowly rose over the horizon, it cast a golden glow over the trees and the cabin, while Don Mateo slowly came awake from his dreams. Julian, who was already awake and busy, made breakfast. Over the days spent in the cabin, a comforting pattern had formed, with a good mix of work and rest. Talking and being quiet, Don Mateo said, "Good morning, Julian Cito," in a soft voice. "What surprises does the day have in store for us?" "Good morning, Don Mateo," Julian answered with a lot of energy. "Today I was thinking about going deeper into the forest. We never know what secrets we might find." Because Julian was so interested in everything around him. Every tree, stream, and sound in the forest seemed like a chance to learn more. Even though Don Mateo was old and had bad health, he let himself get caught up in the young man's excitement. They went on small adventures together around the house and learned about the beauty and magic of nature. One day, Julian was exploring a new part of the forest when he came across a stone that was partly hidden. When they looked more closely, they saw that it wasn't just any stone, but an old piece of pottery. "Look at this, Don Mateo," What? Julian yelled, his eyes shining with joy. What it looks like is very old. If so, could it be from your ancestors? Don Mateo walked up and looked at the find with a mix of surprise and longing. That makes sense. Julian Cito. My family has owned this land for many years. There may still be things that haven't been told. The strange object was the main topic of discussion that night in the cabin. Julian was full of questions. So he listened carefully as Don Mateo told stories about his relatives from times that were both easier and harder. Somewhere in the forest. My grandparents used to talk about a hidden treasure. Don Mateo said, his voice full of doubt and excitement. I always considered it mere tales for entertaining children. But now, with your discovery, I can't help but ponder if there might be some truth to those legends. Julian went to bed that night with a lot of ideas going through his head. What if there really was a prize hidden in the forest? What if he and Don Mateo were about to find out something that would change their lives for good? The days that followed were full of new energy. Julian spent hours looking around in the bush because he thought he might find a treasure. Even though Don Mateo was more careful, he couldn't hide his excitement with a smile. He told Julian Cito, be careful. Don't let the pursuit of the treasure cause you to overlook the beauty of the journey. One morning, Julian was exploring near an old oak tree when he felt something hard and cold under the ground. He carefully dug around and found a small, heavy box with strange symbols on it. He ran with the box to the cabin as his heart beat fast. Look what I found. Julian yelled out loud. Could this be part of the treasure? Don Mateo looked at the box with a mix of wonder and respect. That's a possibility. Julian Cito. It looks like this box is very old. It could hold something very valuable. They opened the box together, their hands shaking. Inside was a collection of gold coins and jewels that gave off their own light in the dark cabin. Their faces showed shock as they looked at the prize they had found. Julian whispered, This could change everything. His voice was a mix of fear and excitement. But Don Mateo looked at the prize with a calmness that was out of the ordinary. He said, yes. It could change a lot of things. But we need to be careful. Julian Cito. This kind of gift can bring both good and bad luck. That night, Don Mateo and Julian talked about the future while the fire crackled and shadows moved across the walls of the house. When the treasure was found, it opened up a world of opportunities and brought up tough questions. What must they do? How could they be sure that this lucky break would be a blessing and not a curse, or even worse, something that would cause trouble? Know a source of problems. Julian offered. Maybe we should think about using this treasure for a good cause. Something that can help other people as well as ourselves. Don Mateo smiled and nodded, happy with how smart and kind the young man was. I agree with you. Julian Cito. We need to be smart and kind about how we use this gift. We will figure out the best way to move forward together. So, under the roof of the simple cabin, with an unexpected prize by their side, Don Mateo and Julian faced a new day full of both doubt and hope. The life in the bush, which started out as an escape, was turning into an adventure they could not have imagined. In the days after the wealth was found, things in the cabin changed in a way that no one saw coming. The discovery gave Don Mateo and Julian a new sense of purpose. But it also put them in a lot of danger. The weight of a big choice cast a shadow over a life that used to be focused on daily survival and enjoying simple pleasures. Don Mateo warned Julian Cito. We must be careful with what we do with this treasure. One morning as they looked at the gold coins reflecting in the sun, many have lost their way for less. I know. Julian nodded, understanding how important what he said was. But I also sense that this discovery is an opportunity to do something extraordinary. Something that can make a positive impact. Their talk became a fine balance between being excited about the possibilities and being wary of the problems that could come up. Julian, full of the energy and hope of youth, thought of ways to use the treasure to make their lives and the lives of those around them better. At the same time, Don Mateo, who was older and wiser than the young man, told him that every choice had sometimes unexpected results that in the cabin. Everyone was talking about the mysterious item. Julian was full of questions. So he listened carefully as Don Mateo told stories about his relatives from a time when life was easier but still hard. He said, "My grandparents used to talk about a treasure that was hidden in the forest." Don Mateo's voice was full of doubt and wonder. "I always believed they were merely stories to entertain children. But now, with your discovery, I'm starting to wonder if there might be some truth in those tales." That night, Julian went to bed with a lot of ideas going through his head. What if there really was a prize hidden in the forest? What if he and Don Mateo were about to find out something that would change their lives for good? The days that followed were marked by a fresh energy. Julian spent hours looking for the treasure in the bush because he thought it might be there. Even though Don Mateo was usually very careful, he couldn't help but feel a thrill. He smiled and said, "Be careful, Julian Cito. Don't let the pursuit of treasure make you overlook the beauty of the journey." Early one morning, Julian was exploring near an old oak tree when he felt something hard and cold under the ground. He carefully dug around and found a small, heavy metal box with strange symbols on it. He ran with the box to the cabin as his heart beat fast. "Don Mateo, look at what I found," Julian yelled, almost out of breath. "Do you think this could be part of the treasure?" With a mix of surprise and respect, Don Mateo looked inside the box. "That's a possibility, Julian Cito. This box looks very old. And it might hold something very valuable inside." They opened the box together, their hands shaking. Inside was a collection of gold coins and jewels that gave off their own light in the dark cabin. Their faces lit up with amazement as they saw the prize they had found. This could change everything," Julian said in a soft voice. Feeling both excited and scared, but Don Mateo looked at the treasure with a strangely calm mind. He agreed. "Yes. It could change a lot of things. But we need to be careful, Julian Cito. This kind of gift can bring both good and bad luck." At night, Don Mateo and Julian talked about the future while the fire crackled and shadows moved on the walls of the house. Finding the prize opened up a lot of options. But it also brought up some tough questions. What must they do? How could they be sure that this good luck would turn out to be a blessing instead of a curse? "Maybe we ought to consider utilizing this newfound wealth for a benevolent cause," said Julian. "Something that extends beyond our own benefits to help others." Don Mateo gave the young man a nod, recognizing his intelligence and kindness. "I agree with you, Julian Cito. We need to be smart and kind about how we use this gift. The best thing to do will be decided by all of us together." So, under the roof of the simple cabin, Don Mateo and Julian faced a new day that was both uncertain and full of hope. They were also with an unexpected prize after they found the treasure. What started out as being a punishment in the bush turned into an adventure neither of them had planned. Things took a turn in the cabin that no one saw coming. The finding gave Don Mateo and Julian a new sense of purpose but also a lot of uncertainty. The weight of a big choice cast a shadow over a life that used to be about surviving each day and enjoying small pleasures, Don Mateo warned Julian Cito. "We must be careful with this treasure," one morning as they looked at the gold coins reflecting the sun. "Men have lost their way for less." "I know," Don Mateo knew how serious his words were. But he also thought that this finding gave him a chance to make a big difference during their talks. They went back and forth between being excited about the possibilities and being careful about possible problems. Julian, full of youthful energy and idealism, thought of ways to use the prize to make their lives and the lives of those around them better. Don Mateo, who was very wise for his age, told the young man that every choice has effects that you can't predict, because of this idea. They set aside time to learn more about the forest. With each expedition, new parts of nature and the past of the land were discovered that had not been seen before. Sometimes, they were by a stream when they saw something shiny and metal catch their eye. When they looked more closely, they found a number of partially buried artifacts that were ancient relics that told them about the forest's past and the people who lived there. Julian held up an old coin and said, "Look at this. Don Mateo. Each discovery is like a window to a forgotten past." Don Mateo nodded, and his face lit up with joy. These places have lots of stories to tell. If we keep looking, who knows what else we might find. In the town at the same time, stories spread about the wealth that Don Mateo and Julian had found. In the streets and markets, people talked about the two's newfound wealth and made guesses about what they were up to. Some people wished they had their luck, while others were truly happy for them. "Have you heard about Don Mateo and young Julian?" Someone asked another person a question. "They say they found a treasure in the forest by accident. Can you imagine what you'd do if you had so much?" But the material wealth was only a small part of their daily lives. Don Mateo said that the real wealth was in their relationship with nature and the knowledge they had gained. "In the relationship we forged." Julian Cito. "Gold can buy many things. But there are treasures in life that are beyond price," said the older Julian. He was interested in the opportunities that gold offered. But he understood how Don Mateo felt. He had gained so much from living in the bush, learning from nature, and spending time with Don Mateo that no amount of gold could compare. Julian agreed. "You're totally right, Don Mateo. This treasure has given us much. But the most valuable is the wisdom I've gained here with you and the peace that this place bestows upon us." As the days went by, Julian and Don Mateo used some of their wealth to make life better in the cabin and help some people in town in a sneaky way. They got the tools and goods they needed, strengthened the cabin to make it safer and more comfortable, and sometimes helped neighbors who were having trouble. The town's residents heard about their good deeds, which slowly changed how some people saw them. People would say, "They haven't just found a treasure. They have hearts of gold." Don Mateo and Julian talked about the heritage they were leaving behind one evening as they watched the sun go down behind the mountains. Julian Cito. "Our journey here is about more than just gold and money. We're building something that will last, a tradition of kindness and knowledge." As the sun went down, Julian felt incredibly thankful for everything they had been through. "Thank you, Don Mateo, for telling me about your life and your knowledge. We've made something beautiful here together. Something that will last longer than our time in this forest." From the forest cabin, the story of Don Mateo and Julian kept going. It was full of excitement, discovery, and kindness. Every day brought them new lessons and experiences that made their lives better in ways they never thought possible. They had found a treasure that was more valuable than money in the peace of the forest, the warmth of the cabin, and each other. It was the prize of a life lived with love and purpose, with the changing of the seasons. Don Mateo and Julian's life in the house changed in big ways. Finding the treasure in the bush was just the start of a series of events that would change not only their lives but also the lives of people in the nearby town. When they got rich, they started making plans to improve not only their home but also the health of the people in the neighborhood. Don Matteo said to Julian and Cito one morning as he looked over the plans Julian had made the night before. Julian Cito. We've been lucky to have this wealth. And we must use it wisely. Our initial step will be to construct a house where both of us can lead more comfortable lives. And then we'll explore ways to assist the town. They were both excited about the idea of building a new house. Julian worked hard on its design. Taking into account both of their needs and wants, their shared goal was for it to be a warm and welcoming place that fit in perfectly with its natural settings. Through some of the gold, they hired the best craftsmen and builders in town to work on the project, making sure that it would also help the local economy. The new house was built in a clearing near the cabin. It looked grand but not flashy, with big windows that looked out over the forest and a porch where Don Matteo could read and enjoy nature. The building became a symbol of Don Matteo and Julian's new life, which was full of wealth, duty, and a desire to do good. Look at what we've done, Don Matteo, Julian said one day as he looked at the almost finished house. It's like a dream come true. Yes, Julian Cito. But remember that real dreams are those we share with other people, Don Matteo told the young man, looking at him with pride and love in his eyes. Once the house was ready, they moved on to other projects. They bought more land and set aside some of it for farming. They hired town neighbors to work on it and made sure that the farming methods were sustainable and good for the earth. Julian told the workers, "We want these lands to show how people can live in harmony with nature. We're not just growing food. We're cultivating a community." The town started to feel better when Don Matteo and Julian got rich. People who used to whisper about how jealous they were now saw them as heroes. And their actions motivated others to look for ways to make their own lives and the lives of their peers better, but their luxurious living didn't change who they were at their core. Don Matteo kept his wise and thoughtful personality and enjoyed quiet nights on his porch. Julian, on the other hand, stayed true to his adventurous spirit and dedication to other people's well-being. Even though he was rich.as, they walked along the beautiful lake that was now on their property. Don Matteo said out loud, "Julian Cito. We've come a long way from those early days in the cabin. We've changed our world and the lives of those around us. But always remember that true wealth lies within us, in our ability to love and share." Julian felt very thankful and had a sense of purpose as he looked at the calm water of the lake. He knew that his trip with Don Matteo wasn't over yet, and that the lessons he had learned would help him find his way in the years to come. I and the town at the same time. The story of Don Matteo and Julian spread like a fairy tale of kindness, giving, and change. People saw them as living examples of how wealth could change things for the better when used for the general good. So, from their fancy home by the lake, surrounded by farmland, they worked hard to build a community that did well under their guidance. Don Matteo and Julian enjoyed a life that was simple and connected to nature. Even though it was comfortable and wealthy, they lived in a green area that surrounded their new home. Day after day went by peacefully, full of small pleasures and the satisfaction that came from having helped change their neighborhood. But, as with all stories, life had planned a new part for them, one that would test how strong their bond was and how strong their spirits were. As the sun slowly rose above the sky one morning, Don Matteo felt a strange tiredness. He slowed down his moves and kept shortness of breath that made it hard for him to speak. Julian, who was always paying attention, showed worry. "Don Matteo, we should call a doctor because you haven't looked good for a few days," Julian said with worry in his voice. "Julian Cito. Body's age. And mine has been worn down for many years. Thank you for your concern," Don Matteo said with a smile, trying to hide how upset he was. Even though Don Matteo tried to reassure Julian, He insisted on calling a doctor. A sad truth came out during the tests. Don Mateo was sick and in very bad shape. The doctor told Don Mateo that he didn't have much time. But he was honest about it. The effects of this discovery were huge. Julian was used to seeing Don Mateo as a strong and wise person. But now he had to face the chance of losing him. "I can't imagine life without you, Don Mateo," Julian told Don Mateo one night as they sat by the fire and watched the flames dance on their faces. The calm Don Mateo replied. "Julian Cito. Every life is a journey with a beginning and an end. What matters is what we do with the time we are given. And together, we have accomplished a lot. You have been like a son to me." The days that followed were a mix of sadness and beauty. Don Mateo and Julian talked for hours, remembering times they had together and things they had learned. Don Mateo told them about the dreams they still had. Don Mateo looked at the young man with thankful eyes and said, "I have lived a full life, Julian Cito. Thanks to you. My last years have been full of joy and purpose." Even though Julian was very sad, he tried to stay strong so that he could be there for Don Mateo in his last days. He took great care of the old person with love and dedication, making sure that every moment was comfortable and full of affection. Julian told her as they walked slowly through the yard one afternoon. "Don Mateo would want everyone to know what a great life you've had and how much you have given, Julian Cito." Don Mateo replied, "Julian Cito. Life is not measured by how much we know about it, but by how our hearts affect those around us. And I think we have touched many hearts together." As Don Mateo's health got worse, Julian started to think about the future. It was scary to think about facing the world without Don Mateo's help and presence. But he remembered what the old man had taught him about being strong and brave. Don Mateo asked Julian one night to call his family. He wanted to say goodbye, read his will, and make sure that his memory would last as he had wanted. With a sad heart, Julian made the calls that were needed to get Don Mateo's family together at the house. The family was touched to see Don Mateo in his bed, even though they had not seen each other in years and had disagreements. When they knew they were going to leave, old wounds seemed to heal. Julian watched from the side, feeling both calm and worried. What's going to happen when Don Mateo leaves? He was curious. Don Mateo told his family how important love, forgiveness, and togetherness are by using a weak but clear voice. He told them not to let their pride and wealth blind them and stressed that the most important things in life are the relationships we build. The will was read in a serious and respectful way. And Don Mateo gave some of his money to good causes and community projects. He left his family a large part of his estate, but with the condition that they continue his example of kindness and care for others. Don Mateo had set aside a special amount for Julian. Julian Cito. You've been my companion and support in these recent years. I not only bequeath to you a part of my fortune but also my eternal gratitude. Follow your heart, as you always have. In the last days of Don Mateo's life, people said goodbye and showed their love. Julian stayed by his side and treasured every moment, every word, and every lesson the old man taught him. As the time to say goodbye came, Don Mateo was with his family and Julian. He closed his eyes with one last look that was full of love and peace. He left behind a world that was deeply changed by him, even though Julian was very sad. He was very thankful for the lessons Don Mateo had taught him. He knew that his journey wasn't over yet and that Don Mateo's lessons would continue to help him in the years to come. With Don Mateo's legacy in hand, Julian faced a new start at the lakeside house. It would be a trip marked by kindness, wisdom, and love that never ends. After Don Mateo left, the luxurious lakeside home was filled with a hush of silence and thought. While Julian was still in grief, He was given a lot of money and an even bigger duty to handle. The will made it clear that Don Mateo wanted the tradition of kindness and love to live on. Even so, some family members were shocked and jealous when Julian's name was written into the will, giving him a big chunk of Don Mateo's estate. They whispered to each other, wondering how this young man who wasn't related to them could be entitled to a share of the fortune. Some people said that Don Mateo wasn't fully aware of what he was doing because he was old and confused. So he wouldn't accept the patriarch's choice even though things were getting more tense. Julian worked hard to keep his cool and treat Don Mateo's family with respect. He carefully repeated Don Mateo's clear wishes, which were that his legacy would be one of help and hope. And Julian was determined to respect that legacy. There were quick disagreements because some family members were greedy and angry and questioned whether the will was legal. They tried to break down the bond between Don Mateo and Julian by implying that the young man had used the old man for his own benefit. Julian had to deal with strong accusations of unfairness and manipulation, especially from one of the kids. He was already going through a tough time, and the pain of loss made things even worse. Julian refused to change his mind about following Don Mateo's wishes and staying away from fights and too much money, even though he was attacked and accused because of pressure from his family. He said, "My only desire is to fulfill what Don Mateo envisioned for his legacy and for all of us." As arguments and talks about how to divide the inheritance went on, family gatherings became more tense. Even though he was feeling down, Julian used memories and lessons from Don Mateo to get through these problems. During one of these events, Julian said, "Don Mateo taught me that true wealth lies in how we treat others and in our efforts to make the world a better place. That's what I'm going to try to do, inheritance or not." People in the town heard about the fight over the will. Many people knew how kind and generous both Julian and Don Mateo were. People in the town stepped up to defend Julian after seeing personally how they worked together to do good things and help others. He said, "Julian has been an angel for this town and for Don Mateo." A friend in the market agreed. Don Mateo was right to want to give him everything he wanted. Don Mateo thinks of him as family more than his own blood. At the same time, Julian stayed committed to the charity projects and efforts he started with Don Mateo. Even though there were ongoing arguments and legal problems, keeping his beloved mentor's vision and ideals alive. He worked hard to improve the community by helping those in need. Even though there was still a fight over the fortune, Julian was determined to honor Don Mateo's memory no matter what happened in the house by the lake. Julian faced an unsure future while remembering times spent with older people. Still, he went into it knowing that he would keep living by the life, love, and giving principles that Don Mateo had taught him, no matter what happened. Due to the debate surrounding Don Mateo's inheritance, Julian became more and more involved in a storm of feelings and legal problems. Don Mateo's family refused to accept that the old man had chosen to include Julian in his will, so they kept trying to get his last wishes thrown out. At a very important family meeting, feelings were running high. Someone from the other side shouldn't be able to claim a piece of our inheritance. One of Don Mateo's kids yelled, his face red with anger. The man said, "There must be a way to undo this." Julian answered calmly, "I am not a stranger. Don Mateo was an important part of my life, just as I was of his. Everything I do and will do with the inheritance is in honor of his memory." At that very moment, an older man lawyer with many years of experience spoke up. "I have reviewed the will and all the circumstances surrounding it. Don Mateo's decision is legal and clearly reflects his intentions. Julian has been more than a friend to Don Mateo. He has been his loyal companion in the last years of his life," the lawyer told the family. "I understand that this may be difficult to accept, but we must respect Don Mateo's will." Julian has demonstrated his commitment not only to Don Mateo but also to the ideals and values he represented. As the argument got heated, the lawyer's firmness and proof of Julian's kindness and dedication to the community started to calm things down. Some family members started to see things differently when they thought about how kind and loving Don Mateo had always been. One family member said in a quiet voice, "Maybe our greed has made us blind. Don Mateo always sought the best for others. And Julian has followed that path." Over time, and after many talks and thoughts, Don Mateo's decision was accepted by the family. Some people offered to help Julian with his community projects because they were moved by his actions and remembered how kind Don Mateo was. After the fight was over, Julian felt relieved and more determined than ever to carry on Don Mateo's work. He told the family, "Thank you for understanding and going along with what Don Mateo wanted. Together, we can do much good in his name." After the inheritance dispute was over, Julian worked harder on his projects than ever before. He kept working in the community, helping people who needed it and backing projects that improved health and education. The people in the town, who had seen how honest and noble Julian was, respected and admired him even more. The neighbors said, "Julian not only got Don Mateo's money, but also his kind heart." Julian moved forward through the green hills and the peaceful lake, carrying the teachings and essence of Don Mateo with him. Even though the journey was hard, he stayed true to the values and love that Don Mateo taught him. Julian honored the memory of Don Mateo with every project he started and every act of kindness he did. Over the years, he left behind a legacy of love, kindness, and community. Don Mateo taught Julian a lot of good values. And his journey kept getting better as he had new experiences after facing challenges. Julian became an important part of the community and embodied Don Mateo's legacy. The big house by the lake turned into a place where people could meet and get help. It became a safe place where people could find support, information, and a sense of belonging. Julian changed a lot over time. He went from being a young man who hit an old man who was being picked on by his family in a car to becoming a respected leader. As a result, he learned how to balance kindness with knowledge and generosity with duty. When some young people asked Julian about community service, he said, "I never saw my life going in this direction. Everything I did with Don Mateo and every choice we made together brought me here. You are the future. And what you learn and share here will make this vision even stronger." Julian's commitment to environment and community growth had led to amazing results. The town that was once empty and ignored had become a model of new ideas, and working together as a community, people were inspired by Julian and Don Mateo's work. And they started doing similar things too. This led to the formation of a network of communities working together to improve the lives of their people. As Julian walked through his yard one evening, he thought about the changes he had seen. He could see his way because the full moon and clear sky were shining light on him. "Don Mateo, you always said that real wealth is in the way we live our lives," he whispered. "I hope I'm honoring your memory." He could feel the old man's presence in the breeze that touched his face. At that very moment, a family from the town came up to the house and thanked Julian for helping them out in a tough situation. "Without your help, I don't know where we would be now," the mother said through tears of thanks. "You've made our lives better." These events made Julian even more sure that he was on the right track. The thanks he received and the smiles on the faces of the children he helped were proof that Don Mateo's deeds lived on. Many years later, at a town gathering, Julian was honored for his unwavering dedication to the community and relentless efforts. The square was full of familiar faces of people whose lives had been changed forever by Julian and Don Mateo's kindness. Today, we honor not just a man, but a spirit, a vision, A legacy of love and dedication to the welfare of others, the mayor told the crowd. Julian. You've shown us that what really makes us rich is what we give. Not what we own. After being thanked, Julian looked out at the group. His heart full of feelings. Every one of you is a part of this story, he said. We've made something beautiful together. Don Mateo used to say, life is a journey of lessons and opportunities. And every choice and act of kindness weaves the fabric of our lives. Our true inheritance is the effect we have on the lives of others. There was loud applause at the end of the ceremony. And Julian knew that his trip was far from over as he left. When Don Mateo put a seed, it grew into a garden full of hope, love, and new opportunities. Julian promised to keep taking care of that yard. To keep teaching and learning. And to keep doing the things that make people happy. In the quiet of the night. Under the watchful stars. Julian realized how important Don Mateo's heritage was. His story showed how people can change and stay committed. Showing that kindness and loyalty can light up the world even in the darkest times. So, with each day that went by and each person he touched, Julian kept writing his story, a story of lasting love, boundless kindness, and unwavering faith in the power of the human heart.